Now, we all share things in common. Falling in love, falling out of love, moving jobs, moving house, having pets, losing pets. And then there's one of the biggest and the worst. The death of a loved one. A terrible, terrible thing. Now, what would be great to believe is that the moment our loved one gets passed on to someone else, whilst we deal with grief, that their body, when it's passed over, is respected and loved. Well, not always. Welcome to Little Hitler. Welcome to The Boys. Welcome to A Hellish Story. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. So, it's nice to be recording again. Forgive my absence from your ears. I'm sorry. It's crazy life right now. Hectic, busy. I won't bore you with the details, but basically, I'm back on track. So don't worry, episodes will be coming your way. Great reaction to the Chelsea Manning story. Thank you very much if you got in touch, and lots of you did. Thanks as well if when there was no new episode last week you reached out to ask if I was okay. And that ranged from Barry, there's no new episode, where is it? To, are you okay? Is everything alright? So there was a real range of stuff going on there. Yes. So, do you know what I'm going to actually, this is what I was going to do. I'm going to give you a podcast recommendation. Loads of you will know this instantly, and you've probably already heard it. I'm probably quite behind. But I've been listening to Someone Knows Something, and it's series... what is it? It's series 5. Yes. Oh my god, it's so good. Now, I've listened to Someone Knows Something, the other series, and I've always really enjoyed them. There's just something about this series that is absolutely... I can't get it out of my mind. Do you know when you love something, when you love a podcast, and you start to slow yourself down listening to it because you're like, oh, this is going to come to an end, and I don't want it to come to an end. That's kind of how I feel about it. Anyway, this particular story, I'll not go into it in detail, but it's just, I just think the way they've done this series, it's the most beautiful, mediation on, grief, the anger of unsolved murder, devastation, racial tension, people's individual personalities. It's so good. So that's Someone Knows Something, series 5. What else to say? Oh yes, thank you for the lovely reviews and the recommendations for Extraordinary Stories podcast. I very much appreciate it. Now, I'm just going to call this one out. To the person who left an iTunes review saying, and I quote, "Yes, the stories are great, but Gary's accent is annoying." Well, two things. I'm called Barry, babe. But, whatever. And, I can't fix my accent. I can't fix it, and I'm not changing it. So, here's my advice. If you've never heard Extraordinary Stories podcast before, if this is your first episode, hello, welcome. You have my love, you have my support. But this is my accent. It's not going to miraculously change by the end of the episode. This is what you will be getting. So, if you're that person who left that review, and if you hear this voice and you think, that voice is not for me, but you want a UK accent, fine. Go, look, listen to the many, many other UK podcasts that exist. There's lots of true crime ones. Some are good, some are a bit shit. But yeah, just to reiterate, my accent will not transform into something that your ears like by the end of this. And it's a bit unfair to attack me on an iTunes review for my accent. Okay? Alright. Onwards to the next story. It's a little bit gruesome in parts, but I've done my usual. I've tried to kind of tone it down so it doesn't feel like we're, going to be made sick by it. It's got at the centre of it a man you will want to punch. I guarantee. It's got all the hallmarks of an extraordinary story. Okay. Let's go. Alright, so we are in California. California dreaming. And it's the 1970s. Now, we're not just anywhere in California. We're in Pasadena. Posh California. California with money. So it's 1929, and there is a man called Charles Lamb who was in the funeral and dead body business. And Charles was a man who worked for lots of different funeral companies. So, he would work at different funeral homes, he would organise funerals for people who died, etc, etc. And after years of doing this for different companies, Charles thought, nah, do you know what I want? I want a building of my own. I want my own company. And he had this vision for it. He had this idea of what it should look like and what it should be like. He felt like he could see it really clearly. So there was a building in Pasadena where he lived, and it was pretty run down. It was disused. It hadn't been touched in years. And so he took this building and he took a loan from the bank, and he built his vision of what he wanted his funeral home to look like. And what he built is pretty sexy. And I know sexy is not quite what you would imagine with a funeral home. It's got this sort of like Spanish almost design. It's very, very, very white. It's rounded. It's spacious. It looks like a really attractive building from the outside. Now, for Charles Lamb, it's not just about what the building looks like from the outside. He had a very clear idea of what he wanted the interior to be like, and it was big drawing rooms, large rooms filled with sofas and elegant furniture, expensive curtains, tapestries. His vision of his funeral home is that it shouldn't feel like, when people come to it, that it's cold and it's clinical and it's uncomfortable. He wanted it to feel like a home. You see, I don't know about that, right? I don't know if these things work. You know that, I'm sure everyone's experienced it. You walk into somewhere and in the design, they've tried to sort of make it somewhere that feels like you're at home, or it doesn't feel like you're in, a doctor's waiting room. Instead, it feels like you're in some sort of Edwardian drawing room, or, the kind of thing I'm going for. Like, I don't know. They don't really work on me. There's a pub in Glasgow called Flat 101, and it's designed like a flat, basically, right? It's just designed like a flat, and the bar is where the kitchen is in the flat. So you go in and there's like a living room, and there's a couple of sofas, and then there's other little sort of rooms that you would have in a flat. Now, the concept is nice, but it's really weird, because rather than sit at, say, a pub table, drinking your pint or your gin or whatever you're drinking, you lie on a double bed to drink it. Or you sit in the TV room on a sofa with loads of strangers. I just found it weird. I don't think it really had the desired effect on me. I don't think I felt like I was at home. Or I was, oh, this is like, yeah, I feel really relaxed. And I just didn't get that. I mean, if I was truly feeling like I was at home, I'd be like, right, shoes off. I'm going to sit here in my boxer shorts. And I'm pretty sure for that kind of behaviour, I would get kicked out. Anyway, so back to Charles Lamb. I'm not saying he was saying to people, come into the funeral home and strip down to your underwear. But he was saying, come here and it should feel nice to be here and not cold. So the business was a place where you bring your dead loved ones to be embalmed and prepared for their funeral. A place where you can visit them one last time before the funeral. Charles Lamb, he was big in the funeral game. He was president of the Funeral Association for California. Wow. Oh my God, imagine their monthly meetings. They must have been a riot. So the funeral home that he has created, it's doing very well. People are actually responding to this idea. They like this kind of homely feeling. But time passes and Charles starts to get older, he starts to get ill, and it starts to look like he's going to die. So what he does is he passes the business down to his son, Lawrence. Lawrence Lamb. Brilliant name there. Lawrence Lamb. Hi. So Lawrence Lamb and his wife, they run the business for many, many years, and it is very, very prosperous. It's really well known in California, and people come from miles around to, have their loved ones' funeral plans put into place, have their loved ones buried, because there's a great reputation attached. So Charles Lamb's children run it for many, many years, and then the time comes when they're old, and they hand it over to their children. So just to clarify this, just in case it's getting a bit confusing, we're now on to the third generation of the Lamb family to own this funeral home. So Charles built it, passed it on to his son, and his son is about to pass it to his daughter. And his daughter is a woman called Lori-Ann Lamb. And this is where the real story starts. Lori-Ann Lamb gets described as a movie star beauty. What? What does that mean? It means nothing. It's another one of these pointless statements. I mean, I get the sentiment, right? I get it. I get the idea. You think of sort of Judy Garland, Fred Astaire, Rock Hudson. Yeah. We get it. What does it actually mean? I just think it's so ridiculous. Like, what would sum up Hollywood beauty for you? I don't know. I don't like it. Anyway, this is how she gets described, and she's full of charm. She's full of wit. She's this really alluring person. So, the other important thing to know about Lori-Ann Lamb is that she is quite the saleswoman. So, she could seduce people with her good looks and her charming conversation. And when they were in to, say you'd lost your great aunt Betty, right? And here you are, you're bringing great aunt Betty in to the Lamb funeral home to be buried and all of this. While you were there, Lori-Ann Lamb would start making you think about your own funeral and your own payment plans for the future. And she was so good at it, getting people to sign into payment plans all the time, because she knew how to work people. So you've got Lori-Ann and her husband David, and they are running the show. Now they have a son, and the son is called David. David. David's actually going to become our focal point, and it's what David does that really interests me in this story. So, David, the son of Laurie Ann and her husband, is described as gorgeous, intoxicating, athletic, driven, and a wild kind of guy. So, David, obviously, raised by parents who run a funeral home, he shows absolutely zero interest in it. He's not into it at all. He's just like, no, I'm sorry, death, funerals, not my thing. What he's actually really into is football. That's what he wants to do as a career. He wants to be a football player for the big American football teams like... I said that statement like I knew what the end of it was going to be. I don't know American football teams. No, I do. The Yankees, is that one? The Mets? Something like that? The Washers? Washers? Am I making that up? I don't know. Something like... Yeah, one of these. Anyway, one of these big ones. So he doesn't want anything to do with the family business. He's like, no thanks, not for me. I'm all about the football. So in his final year of school, David, he tries out for various football teams, only to find himself rejected by them all. I think it's a situation of he's really good within the school context, but actually transfer those skills not so good. Not as good as he maybe thought he was. So his dreams of football are dashed. So he leaves school, he's a bit gutted, and he takes on just various part-time jobs. He works in hockey stadiums, serving drinks, and then he's a casino dealer for a while. What he actually wants to do, and this is interesting in terms of what's going to happen with his story, he actually wants to go into the police, but he fails the tests to get into the police twice. So, he's working these jobs, and his family are saying to him, come on, look, join the family business. Come, be a part of the funeral home. And he's like, no, I don't want to. It doesn't interest me. But his mother, movie star Laurie Ann, she wears him down. And she says, look, okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go on an embalming course. So he goes to the embalming course just to please his mum. He hates it, and he says it's really boring. I mean, I imagine it would be. I think it would be boring as hell. But his mum says, yeah, look, it might be boring, but there is money to be made from the business of death. And, if you go through this course, you can be a part of the family business. So he perseveres, and he gives in. He says, fine, right, I will work for the family business. And this is where it all goes entirely wrong. David Sconce is young, hot-headed, gutted that his football career didn't work out, and decides that he really wants to make something of himself here in the family business. Well, I'm just going to set this out right now because we need to just be honest about this. David Sconce, I think, is one of the biggest pricks that has ever lived. He has such a big ego. Loves himself. Absolutely loves himself. And I think it comes from... It's that whole idea of he was really good at football at school. And so he was this kind of big man. He was everyone knew who he was because he was this great footballer. And it kind of stays with him in his life. And as you'll see how he goes about his life. So the family business, it's bringing in bodies, it's organising funerals, and occasionally it's cremating bodies for funerals. Now this was the mid-80s. Cremation wasn't a big thing. Cremating was actually quite new as an idea of how you had a funeral for your loved one. I hope when I'm saying cremation, I'm saying it in a way that's clear what I'm saying. I don't know. I'm assuming it's a universally understood word. I may be saying it, and maybe if you're in Australia or America, you're going, sorry, what was the word you just said there? On what I'm saying. Now, the cremation game is small in the USA. Very, very small in the mid-80s. And you've only really got across the whole of the USA, you've only got 10% of bodies being cremated, which is really small when you think about it. But in California, 40% of funerals are cremations. So the Lamb Funeral Home, it does maybe 1 to 2 cremations in a week. Now, I hate this term, but every funeral home at the time, because of the rise in popularity of cremations, began to invest in cremation ovens. Ugh. Have there ever been 2 more grim words than cremation oven? So in the Lamb Funeral Home there were two of these ovens, and obviously the design of them is that they're very, very big, and you place a dead body into it, you turn it into ashes, and it comes out of like a small funnel at the side to be returned for the family. Now the cost of cremations was high. It cost a lot more than a burial did. It was $100 roughly in that time in California to get a cremation. And then, all of a sudden, a new price comes along. You could get a cremation for $50, half price, if you went to David Sconce and his Lamb Funeral family home. Remember, this is the place where, it's meant to feel like home. You are to trust these people. So for $50, you can get your loved one's ashes back. Now, when you were getting your loved one's ashes back, were they coming back to you in the purest sense? No. No, they were not. You were getting whatever came out of the furnaces at the Lamb Funeral Home run by David, because this is what David was doing. He was putting 3, sometimes 4 dead bodies at a time into one furnace and cremating them all together. Horrendous. So, 3, sometimes 4 bodies would go into one oven. But what if that number just got higher? Because you see, David had begun to realise there was money to be made in the cremation business, and big money. He was starting to really rake money in. People were coming there because it was cheaper. It was cheaper than going elsewhere. Did they know how many bodies were being cremated at one time? No, of course not. Right, I'm just going to zoom out and talk a little bit, just for a second, about David's parents. So his mother, Lori-Ann, of course, the movie star beauty, Judy Garland of the day. They, apparently, will say they have no knowledge that this is happening. No idea that their son is burning multiple bodies and profiting from it. Yes, right, my arse. They knew. They fucking knew. Shut up. And I'll tell you how we know that they knew. Certain things began appearing in California, near where the funeral home was, on the black market. And it was David's mother selling them. She was selling eyeballs, gold teeth, kidneys, hearts, and even brains. Sometimes she was selling them to medical science. Otherwise, she was going on the black market. The bodies that were coming in to the Lamb funeral home were being stripped of these things, their teeth, their eyeballs, before David was placing them in groups in one oven. Now, I've already said cremation was a booming business in California, and it really was. It was huge. And yeah, I'm not I'm not using this phrase to be funny, but there's no smoke without fire. And suspicion around David Sconce and the Lamb funeral home, it began to grow amongst other funeral directors. Not the general public. The general public were completely not aware of this at all. But other funeral companies were starting to ask, how can he possibly be turning out cremations so fast? Well, we know how he was doing it. But they're scratching their head and they're thinking, how in the fuck is he able to do this? What was actually kind of driving a lot of people in the funeral business to look closely was they just hated David Sconce. I mean, I've already said it. He is an absolute prick. Loves himself. Thinks he's got this whole thing sewn up. Thinks he's the big man. He's got it all sorted. At this time, David is earning $4,000 a week from cremations. And that's because he's now burning upwards of 10 bodies at a time in one oven. 10 bodies. The cheek to do that is just, it's unbelievable. So he's burning them, he's giving them back to families. They've no idea they're getting mixed ashes back. Imagine it. Right, you'd handed over, Uncle Frederick, and you get his ashes back, but you've no idea that actually that's not just Uncle Frederick in this little box. That's 10 other strangers. So suspicion, it continues to grow. And what doesn't really help is that David's now walking around with loads of cash. He's got all the money. And he's flashing his cash around town. He's letting everyone know how much money he's raking in. He buys a little white Corvette. And he gets a private license plate which reads, "I burn for you." Oh, come on. So spelled out on the license plate, it's like I space BRN space 4, as in the number 4, and then you. Douchebag. What a fucking douchebag. You are hereby crowned king of the douchebag society. So David thinks, okay, I need some help with this now. I need to get more people involved in the burning of bodies business. So what he does is he enlists a group of guys that he used to play football with at school to work alongside him. Because he's basically still got this, I'm the big guy at school, I was really good at football. Even though by now he's, in his 20s. He gathers together the boys, his ex-school friends, to help him. And they help him to do two things. They help him in the crematorium to burn the bodies. But they're also there because David wants to start to threaten the rival funeral businesses. Especially the ones who are asking questions about his ability to create so many people in a week. Other funeral directors started to find that their tyres on the car were being slashed. Threatening notes were arriving at the office. Death threats were being put through their door at home. And this is how David is actually using his boys. Now that's not a term I'm coming up with. David, that's what he actually called them. The boys. So suspicion is continuing to grow around David, and he realises, right, this isn't going to go away. This isn't going to change. So what he decides to do is change premises. So with all this mega money that he's bringing in, he buys an old, unused ceramics factory in Pasadena. It's a factory that used to make like big tiles. And when he gets his hands on the factory, he installs 4 huge ovens, and he resumes his business. His boys by this time are carrying 40 to 50 bodies a day to David's new premises, and one of them will later state that at one point David was forcing them to put 18 bodies at a time into the ovens to burn. 18 bodies at the same time, for fuck's sake. This guy. David had earned the name Little Hitler by his workers because he loved shoving bodies into the furnace. Oh, great, yeah, great. Little Hitler, brilliant. An Auschwitz joke, excellent, great, funniest kind, I find. Just somewhere, you know, behind rape jokes, paedophile jokes, disabled jokes. Get the fuck. Little Hitler. Anyway, Little Hitler wasn't stopping, and that's because he was earning a fortune. He had upped his price and he was making around $50,000 a month by cremating 40 people a day in his ovens. The boys, who were later made to talk about it, described how he would walk around with a crowbar, and before a body was burned, he would crack open the chest of the body, take out the heart, smash the skull in order to get the teeth, and the teeth would be kept in jars around the ovens until he had enough to sell a jar of teeth. And the organs and the things from the bodies, they're still appearing on the black market, still being sold by his mother. Now, moving premises did not stop the suspicion. It's just not going away. But David just wanted to get on with it. He wanted to just get on with his business without the fear that someone was looking over his shoulder. A funeral director called Tim Walters, who's in the nearby area, he's the most suspicious of all. He knows David. He's known him for years. And he's the one who's really ringing the alarm bell to say, something isn't right here. Something is not right. Well, for Tim Walters, that's a huge mistake. Because Mr. fucking I burn for you, David, he orders his boys to attack Tim Walters, and they do this gladly. Tim is beaten really badly on the driveway of his home, and he's threatened by the boys to stay away from talking about David Sconce and the crematorium. David Sconce is sending a clear message: do not fuck with me. So you would think that Tim would at this point go to police and say, look, yeah, I have all these suspicions about this guy, and I've been beaten up in my driveway and told to not talk about him anymore. But he actually doesn't. He's so kind of shaken by the attack that he doesn't do it. Yeah. So David's got a good thing going, raking in the money. His business, it's his pride and joy. But now a bit of a disaster is going to come David's way. The building that David is using, the ceramic tile factory, the ovens are at full pelt, full steam, one day and a fire breaks out and the factory burns to the ground. So with the factory gone, it doesn't stop David. What he does is he hires a new building in Pasadena. He installs new ovens and the whole process starts again. I mean, he really thinks he's got this so organised and so under the radar. But there's still eyes watching him and going, how is he doing this? How's he carrying out this number of cremations in a week? And, why are things still appearing on the black market so rapidly, so easily? Why are so many kidneys and hearts and eyeballs appearing? Yeah, I get the black market right isn't great, but who's shopping for brains or eyeballs? In fact, I don't know, someone must be. I guess people want them. I mean, I'm not judging anyone's Amazon or eBay basket. I'm just saying I think it's weird. Well, I suppose I am kind of judging, yeah. Now, of course, if you're handing over your loved one, you have no idea that the ashes that you're getting back are, from a mix of, 17 other bodies, but also that your loved one had their organs ripped out. But here's the awful thing. The absolutely fucking awful thing. You had actually already agreed to it. You signed paperwork which said you were happy for it to happen. Now, did you know you were signing this? Did you know that somewhere in the paperwork it was indicated that your loved one might be cremated with others? That their organs might be taken from them? No, of course you didn't. Of course you didn't, because who would sign that piece of paper? Well, why didn't you know? Because David and his mother were very clever. Very, very clever. What they did was they got people to sign this documentation at their weakest moments. And they knew that. They knew that in the moments of grief, you hand someone a piece of paper that, it's a document that's got 9 pages, and there's a little line at the very back on the 9th page. You're never going to sit there and read that. You're never going to sit there and read all of that and sign it and go, oh yeah, that's absolutely fine. So, David's mum had created the paperwork. And this is where we go back to her movie star presence. So she would, use her charm to get people to sign these documents. And it's just fucking awful. People had no idea what they were signing. Now, if anybody was switched on enough to go, no, I just want to look through the paperwork before I sign it, and then went, oh, actually, I'm not signing it because I don't want them cremated in a group sense, and I don't want their organs taken from them, David and his mother would say, that's fine, that's absolutely fine. And then as soon as the person was out the door, they would forge their signature. Oh. For the next 3 years, David's scones just continued to make a fortune. Up to 50, sometimes 60 bodies a day going through his ovens. Then, a call is placed by a stranger in Pasadena to a nearby police station. And the call comes from an 80-year-old man who lives near the premises that David is now working out of. He calls the police and he says, the most terrible smell is coming from the factory near where I live, and I think it's the smell of burning bodies. And the police officers say, no, that can't be true. It's the factory burning things. You must be mistaken. The man on the phone, he protests and he says, I'm telling you what I can smell. It's flesh. That's what it is. And the police officer says again, no, you really are wrong. The man on the phone says, don't tell me they are not burning bodies. I was at the ovens at Auschwitz, and I know what burning flesh smells like. The man who'd made the call had been a Holocaust survivor. He'd been at Auschwitz and had escaped. So, police visit the factory, and what they find is just a horror scene. Dead bodies are piled up, ready to be burned. The bodies with skulls smashed in, organs missing. And they know now that the call from the man claiming that there's a smell of burning flesh, that he isn't wrong. They open the ovens to discover 18 bodies rammed into each oven, ready to be burned. So the factory is immediately closed, shut down as a crime scene, and David Sconce is arrested. Now, his charges. He's charged with the mishandling of human remains and the unlawful discharging of human waste. Now, you would hope here, right, that of course, you would really hope that the charges would be really severe, but no, that is what he's charged with. I mean, it's a ridiculous thing. It's basically the equivalent of going, oh, you haven't really cleaned the bodies up properly. Oh, sorry. Oh, silly me. You know, it's light. It's really light in terms of what he's actually been doing for years. So his family are questioned, you know, his mum, his dad. They're asked to talk about it. They deny anything. They deny knowing anything about this side of the business. They're like, oh, we're a respectable family funeral business. We know nothing. What a load of bollocks. Shut up. You know exactly what is going on. Anyway, court arrives. By this time, the story of what's been happening in those ovens is out there. Thousands of people have discovered that their loved ones' ashes are actually a mix of God knows how many other people. The Lamb Funeral Home, although David hasn't been there for years, his mum and dad are still there. It's closed down, shut down by police. So court. Now, what would you be expecting or hoping for David Sconce here? Well, I would be hoping that I'd be forced to face up to his actions, that Mr. Big Man, Mr. Little Hitler would be brought down. And that doesn't happen. The charges against David are so weak and so caught up in a boring legal business that he gets a minimal sentence, basically for not looking after dead bodies correctly. Ridiculous. Fucking ridiculous. He gets 5 years in prison. And of that, he only serves 2. Ugh. So he gets put on parole. And he's given quite severe parole conditions. He's told that he must not, under any circumstances, go near anyone in the funeral business who were his rivals. He must avoid anybody who works in that industry. This is probably where, it hits a little bit harder, is that the family were forced to pay $15 million in damages to families who were affected by David's actions. And it left them pretty poor. It left them very poor. David had built a fortune. I mean, he'd built an absolute fortune, but it was gone. It was gone. So this was 1992. So the family have no money now. You know, movie star mum. Yeah, she's walking around Pasadena selling fake bus tickets for $2. That was what they had to do. They had to try and make money, steal money, find money in whatever way that they could. So after 2 years in prison, David Sconce is out and about. And, can he just be a normal guy? No, of course not. He's a dick, that's why. He starts once again to get interested in the funeral business. Did he not listen? Has he not heard that he's been told not to be interested in this? And so he starts, getting his nose in about, what's going on with this company and that company. And he runs into an old enemy of his from the funeral business. One of the people who had been a few years ago raising an eyebrow about what David was doing. And here's what he does. He orders his boys to rough this guy up. And he then orders a hitman to kill this old rival. But before the hitman can actually do it, the entire thing gets uncovered, and it's a massive violation of David's parole terms. So he's brought in front of the judge again, and this time he goes to jail for 25 years. It's a bit of one of these cases, like I'm trying to think of another one that's like it, where someone commits actually like a really hideous crime, and then they end up with a very, very light sentence, but then the next thing that they do is actually where they end up getting a really big sentence. Help me out here if you can think of a story that's like that. Let me know, as I'm really sure there's like a dead famous one staring me in the face that I can't think of. Someone who's committed something, had a really rubbish, like, short sentence, but then they've done something small a year later, and that's where the real punishment's kicked in. Anyway, 18,000 lawsuits were brought against David Sconce and his family's business. And they're all going to go unanswered because David Sconce just refuses to talk. He won't talk about it, and neither will his family. They just almost like pretend it just hasn't happened. David Sconce is in prison in California, and he is due for parole in 2022. In his life, David Sconce burned almost 30,000 bodies in his ovens, and the families who received these ashes had to deal with the fact that the ashes that they got back were not the ashes of their loved ones. And so ends the story. Well. Horrible, I know. It's not nice. But yeah, fascinated by that. Thank you, Nicole. It was Nicole Healing who pointed this story in my direction. Yeah, a horrible one. And yeah, that guy, I mean, terrible way to just treat other human beings, or, treat bodies. Awful. Alrighty then. Well, if you want to get in touch, say hi, talk to me about this story, talk to me about any story, please do. Do not hesitate, do not hold back. I love to hear from you. I'm sorry if you've sent me something and I haven't replied yet. I will get to you in time. If you asked for a shout out, similarly, we'll get there. Don't worry about it. Also remember now that there is Extraordinary Stories Podcast merchandise selling very well. Thank you for your pictures of you with some merchandise. It's lovely to see that. Check out Someone Knows Something Series 5, that podcast. Let me know what you think about it. I'd like to talk to someone about it because I feel like I'm going a bit mad because I've been living with this, listening to this podcast for ages, and now I kind of want to talk about it. So, yeah. And that's really it from me. Until the next episode, which won't be too long away, I promise. Just nice to be back, nice to be chatting with you. Good luck in your life. Yep, good luck with it all. Hope it goes well. Hope you're having a nice day wherever you are. I'm rambling. I'm doing the rambling thing. Okay. Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.